I'm Anthony Willroth. Welcome to Eyes on CoMo, where we take a look at Columbia and Boone County local government and politics. And today, I need to talk to you guys about last night's March 6, 2023 City Council meeting here in Columbia. It was a mess. The atmosphere was unlike any City Council meeting in recent memory, except for maybe the Fusis meeting. But this was different from that. The vibes were weird in the room from the jump. And if you ask me, that's because City Council knew what was in store last night. A few videos ago, I introduced a new group that I'm a part of, Hold CoMo Accountable, and we have 3 demands. It's to open up the ARPA process, that is, stop treating it as sealed records, give us functional police oversight with an independent investigative civilian police review board, and no new tools for police until we get such effective oversight. My past 2 videos have been about recent abuses that are in the news by our police. So that sets the stage for last night, where members of Hold CoMo Accountable showed up to give public comment. We're going to take a look at that. Comments from Chris Jones, who is there not only for Hold CoMo Accountable, but also a new group you'll learn about soon enough, which is Stop Police Violence, a division of Race Matters Friends. Comments that I give. Comments from Laura Gutiérrez Pérez, Sarah Johnson, and Renee Carter. Then at the end of the video, we're going to take a look at exactly what pushing to hold people accountable can get you. We did end up with a small victory at the end of the night. I did not leave that room feeling good, but we got something, so we'll talk about that.
Good evening. My name is Chris Jones. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the group Stop Police Violence. It's a division of Race Matters Friends. I would first like to thank Quaylen's family, friends, beloved ones for attending tonight. They are in the audience. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We keep failing to learn, so we keep repeating. On January 17th, 2023, Andrea said in regards to the death of Mr. Pruin by police officers, "In the absence of information and fact, we often try to fill the gaps. That's how our brains are wired. We try to make sense of different pieces and parts of the story because, again, that's how we work. That's how we are built. And so sometimes that sort of natural process often will yield a lot of assumptions that we make. So I just want to say that I'm sympathetic towards the trauma and the grief of the events of this week, last week, I guess, because it's Tuesday. I also really want all of us to wait for all of the information and for the facts. I want to support the investigation of the State Highway Patrol, but I also want to look for receiving that information. What happened? What the additional context of the situation, because we don't have it right now. So I look forward to hearing more about that, but I would just encourage us all to slow down some. Well, on November 14th, 2021, Quaylen Jacobs was killed by 2 Columbia police officers after being at the Vibes Lounge downtown. That information has been known since November 2021. However, within the last 2 weeks, all of the Columbia police reports, State Highway Patrol reports, ballistic reports, and the autopsy have come to light. What we know is that around 3 a.m., gunshots rang near Vibes. The crowd scattered. From there, the reports there are 4 reports, and they all give conflicting stories. Sergeant Schuster says that he identified the shooter because he didn't think that Mr. Jacobs was running. He claimed or was running right. He claims to have told Mr. Jacobs to stop. Mr. Schuster claims he saw a gun and told Mr. Jacobs to put the gun down. He then fired his gun approximately 5 times. Schuster then said he put Mr. Jacobs' gun in the holster. Schuster claims not to have seen the other officers. Officer Podorf had a different account of the events. He said that he heard 8 to 15 gunshots. He said he saw Schuster fall. He saw Schuster shoot Mr. Jacobs. So he shot Mr. Jacobs. He took Mr. Jacobs' gun and he threw it to the side. And then when the highway patrol asked him why he shot, he said, "I can't honestly say." So the gun was taken from Mr. Jacobs' body by both Schuster and Podorf. The supposed gun was never identified in any of the reports. No gun was found with Mr. Jacobs' fingerprints. No gun residue was found on Mr. Jacobs. Only 2 bullets were found at the crime scenes, didn't match Podorf's or Schuster's guns. This means that Mr. Jacobs never fired the weapon. What else do we know? 4 different officers gave 4 different stories. They didn't match. Neither Podorf nor Schuster had their body cams on, even though they were wearing them. Chief Jones clears Schuster and Podorf of all wrongdoings on May 3rd, 2023, saying he didn't know of any other autopsy or ballistic reports. However, the other reports prove that the police department knew of the ballistic tests ran by the State Highway Patrol, and then an autopsy was performed. The autopsy recorded Quaylen was shot 13 times. 2 shots were fatal. 1 shot was potentially fatal. The coroner ruled his death a homicide. We are asking that you as counsel demand that Mr. Seewood open this case and treat it as a homicide. It was. It is time we learn from history so we don't have to keep repeating the cycle of police violence.
Thank you, Chris.
Remember, Quaylen Jacobs was a son. He was a brother. He was an uncle. He was a friend. Quaylen Jacobs deserves justice. Quaylen's family deserves justice. I am asking all members of council, all members of staff, all members of the public in the room and at home to join me and say his name. Quaylen Jacobs.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on in our council meeting.
Anthony Willroth, downtown business owner. So on Friday, Mike Murphy of CoMo Buzz reported that the city of Columbia and 13 Columbia Police Department officers spent much of the past few years embroiled in a federal civil rights lawsuit, a lawsuit that was dismissed after the plaintiff's attorney died and they were unable to find new counsel. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to watch about an hour of body cam footage from CPD officers related to that lawsuit. What I saw was a group of officers led by Chief Jones and Lieutenant Robert Fox failing in nearly every way you can imagine officers to fail. This is a situation that started with the sexual assault of a 13-year-old girl by her stepbrother, something officers were made aware of from the moment they arrived on the scene. Rather than tend to her needs, those officers, led by Jones and Fox, decided to spend an entire afternoon on a wild goose chase for a gun that no eyewitness had said a crime was committed with. In the process, they terrorized the family of the girl's boyfriend, the Jacksons. I witnessed officers physically assault the Jacksons' mother, Eddie Mae, assault and mace Danya and Daquan Jackson, and even mace the Jacksons' dog, then proceed to search their house with no warrant before ultimately realizing no crime had been committed, before conspiring, literally getting together in a circle and whispering to each other that if they can get someone to say that Danya, the only minor present, had touched a gun, that then they'd be able to get a warrant. What happened to the Jacksons was atrocious, but I'm even more disgusted by how our officers handled the reported sexual assault of the 13-year-old girl. They did not appear to address it until hours later, after they were done terrorizing the Jacksons. There, Chief Jones tells her mother that if she's acting up, you should whoop her. I whoop my kids. It's legal in Missouri. This to the mother of a child who has been raped. Jeff Jones, all right? Ultimately, the girl expressed that she wanted to go into protective custody, and CPD failed to arrange that, releasing her back to her mother who was unconcerned about the rape. Again, this is on video. I have seen it, and the city has spent money defending it in court. This to me is unacceptable. Jeff Jones is not fit to be chief of police, and frankly, most of our officers are not fit to be police at all. The fact that this has gone unreported in the media for years is shameful. The fact that someone sitting up there, be it Nancy Thompson, Barbara Buffalo, Mr. Seewood, knew about this and thought for a second about defending this behavior in court is not okay. Columbia deserves better, and there is no way we can move forward as a community with any trust in our police department without cleaning house. It needs to happen. Again, I have seen this body cam footage. I will attest to it. I will sign an affidavit, anything. It exists, and it shows exactly what I have described. That is what Chief Jones had to say to the mother of a girl that was sexually assaulted, that you should whoop her. It's legal in Missouri.
Anthony. Would anyone else from the public wish to speak? Give one to Sheila too, please.
Laura Gutiérrez Pérez, Ward 2. What is happening in the city of Columbia at this point is neglectful. Every moment that our city council, our city manager, and city staff do not ask for accountability from the Columbia Police Department, they are putting families at risk. City council members, you are just as accountable for the neglect. The horrific details exposed today by Chris Jones and Anthony Willroth about CPD's neglectful and abusive actions should result in action from you. The city's negligence to act has resulted in irreversible harm. These families are waiting for answers, and I think you owe them those answers. You can no longer say that you do not have enough information. You have it now, and we are at this point tired of excuses, of trying to force our city to be transparent with us. If you did not know the details exposed today, it should be worrisome to you. You are leaders, and we need you to lead. As we all know, our Citizens Police Review Board currently has no power to have oversight of the police department, which means we heavily depend on you and the city manager and our city attorney to push our police to obey the law and to have consequences when they do not. I would like to remind you that the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, which according to Section 2148 of the CPRB ordinance, should be part of the CPRB training. And it says that meaningful civilian oversight is proactive, independent, community-driven, empowered, transparent, individualized, an investment in our communities, and iterative process. I ask you to be sincere and to reflect on whether the CPRB is meaningful and effective civilian oversight. I can tell you that in the 9 months that I served, it was not. Residents who experience abuse from CPD, like the Jacobs and the Jackson, and the 13-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted, should have confidence in that a thorough, independent, and transparent investigation will occur. Currently, that is not the case. The details from these cases, which are only a few of many, show that we need an effective civilian oversight. I am really sorry to the families who continue to be harmed by the inaction from our city. By now, I am sure that City Council and the City Manager are aware that SB 26 has rendered the police accountable to no one. And when people are murdered or a complaint is filed against CPD, they investigate themselves and can claim that their actions were justified even when they clearly were not. Finally, City Attorney Nancy Thompson, I would like to ask you to please cite where in the charter it authorized the mayor to pause the CPRB, close public records, and create committees not authorized by council.
Would anyone else from the public wish to speak?
Susan Renee Carter, Ward 2. I'm here representing Hold CoMo accountable in their demand that Columbia leaders treat the ARPA proposals as open public records, not as closed processing of RFPs. The City of Columbia has chosen to treat applications for funding of the $25.2 million designated for our city from the American Rescue Plan Act COVID relief funds as closed records under the pretense of being sealed bids. While we have not gotten answers from the city manager to questions related to what part of Sunshine Law we could reference to allow everyone access to these records, the reason the records are closed only to some people, and the reason or benefit for withholding records, we do know that the public trust is at risk here. Mayor Buffalo's response to similar questions indicated that she thought it had to be a sealed bid process and that there might be sensitive information in the applications. but that they would be public when city leaders had the final applications for consideration of funding. Her statement misrepresents the basic understanding of an RFP process. The city has not presented a fair process for collecting, analyzing, and selecting ARPA-related proposals. A real competitive bid process begins once specific projects have been selected and sent to the RFP process, which is very specific and consistent period of time for all submitted requests. As previously stated, the public trust is at risk here when the process seems to favor the status quo and show a lack of intentional work to help rectify the inequities that were revealed during the pandemic. Hold CoMo accountable demands transparency and accountability. We expect that the records will be open, much like those of the Boone County Commission. Thank you.
Would anyone else from the public wish to speak?
Sarah Johnson, 110 North 10th Street. On January 17th, during council comments, Pat Fowler tried to follow up on a request from constituents that a solid waste audit was needed. Fowler was stonewalled by fellow council members and was told by councilperson Betsy Peters that simply because one person has asked us to do that, I don't know why that means we should embark on doing that. We should think about it, reflect on it, see if it's something we want to do. 2 weeks ago today, on February 20th, during public comment, a member of the public asked for FUSIS to be brought back. No reason or information was provided, but simply a request for FUSIS to be brought back. During council comments, Nick Foster, citing a letter from the Boone County prosecutor, put forth a motion to bring FUSIS back. Andrea Weiner seconded. So one constituent plus one prosecutor is enough to kick things into warp speed, but members of the public rightfully calling for an audit is a moment to pause. Back in November, when FUSIS had its big night, Andrea Weiner was the council person to motion that the staff bring forth legislation in the spirit of the Community Control Over Police Surveillance CCOPS ordinance, CCOPS model, as suggested by a member of the public. There was a discussion spurred by Ms. Fowler over having that process be transparent, meaningful, and collaborative to include the public as much as possible. One of the hesitancies over the amendment of public collaboration was by Mr. Foster, who didn't know what that could look like, even though he brought up several examples himself: public meetings, interested parties meetings, etc. Because of these hesitancies in the late hour, it was decided to remove the public collaboration bit, but with the expectation that there would be a public hearing or something as it comes forward. Where is CCOPS now? How close is it to being put into place, and when will the public have a chance to provide input? Because as a citizen, I've heard nothing about progress towards this legislation. Why is FUSIS being brought back before we have a CCOPS ordinance in place? What correspondence has been had with city staff and their timeline of bringing back that legislation? It's been 3.5 months since FUSIS was voted down. I'm not sure what changed the minds of our council people so much that you're willing to bring it forward without that protective legislation in place ahead of time. When Mr. Foster brought back FUSIS 2 weeks ago, the motion had added legal protections for residents in the use of FUSIS software system. He added that the ordinance should include reference to the protections of any and all First Amendment rights, as well as protections that ensure non-discrimination in its use, and that the ordinance should provide for effective and reviewable written policy controlling the system. Mr. Foster's motion once again packages policy with FUSIS and is once again putting the cart before the horse, the entire problem in the first place. Let me be clear, if we are to adopt a system like FUSIS, appropriate policy written with community input needs to be put into place first as its own motion and its own ordinance. We still need CCOPS.
Would anyone else from the public wish to?
I think one of the things that that happens when we have these type of events is that the city does not investigate themselves. So we do bring in a third party, now it's a highway patrol. But the highway patrol only looks at the incident involving the police-involved shooting. They don't look at what led up to that. And so what we have is we have 3 separate investigations. One is the highway patrol's investigation. One is the investigation that looked at the incident that occurred that led up to the police-involved shooting. And the third is an internal affairs investigation. And so I think the one question was, was there a gun? What we found is there was a gun. There were shell casings from that gun. So that was reported in the report that was done by city. One of the things that I think part of the reason why our report hadn't been released was because the prosecuting attorney was using it in order to decide whether or not they're going to file additional charges to the other gentleman. The chief did contact the prosecuting attorney and say, can we release the city's investigation report? And we got permission to do that. So we can make that report public.
So as you can see, after everyone gave their comments and council gave their comments, which I'll do a whole other video on that, City Manager DeCarlin Seewood said that they're going to release the Columbia Police Department investigations relating to the Quaylen Jacobs shooting. That's one of the things we've been pushing for all along, is just complete information from the police department, not bits and pieces, not leaks from the media via the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Give us everything so we can see what is up. I don't think this would have happened if we weren't there pushing for it, if we weren't emailing them for the past couple weeks, if we weren't in the media last week talking about this shooting. So again, I don't feel great about the response to many things that happened in that room last night, but that is a quantifiable thing that we have gotten by demanding action. So everybody that supports that cause, continue to demand action, and I think that we'll start to see some more results. In the meantime, keep your eyes on CoMo.